lifelong lessons learned in culture and home visiting. Ms. Sneddy is the Assistant Secretary for Native American Early Education and Care of the New Mexico Early Childhood Education and Care Department, or ECECD. Ms. Sneddy was raised in Crown Point, New Mexico, in the eastern region of the Navajo Nation, and comes from the Water Flows Together people and born for the start of the Red Streak people. She brings 24 years of experience in early childhood to the position, ranging from roles as a teacher assistant and home visitor on the Navajo Nation Head Start program, a parent educator with the Chichilta FACE program, a supervisor of the student teacher programs at the University of New Mexico, director of early childhood programs and operations in Tlicho in the Canadian Northwest Territories, early literacy coordinator coach, and most recently teaching early childhood classes for Northland Pioneer College. She has also served on the Navajo Nation First Things First Regional Council. And her most important role is as mother of 4 children. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Sneddy. Thank you.
Hey, Tekla, you did great with the Navajo locations, and thank you. Yate, she cotillion sneddy and she twoidlini shled chini bashishchin. Dias kidney dashachayaro, tenabili dashanella. So that's really just the Diné language version of what Tekla added in my introduction. So I'm glad to be here. I was happy to be asked to share my experience in home visiting and also as a parent educator. Like she mentioned, I have a variety of backgrounds, and I have to share that I never knew what I would do with that variety of experience because they're so specific. And then here I am, Assistant Secretary for the state of New Mexico, and this position covers all of those areas. So, you know, it feels like it wasn't a choice I made, but it was like a something that I was born for, if that makes sense. So I feel like I was chosen to be in this position way before that I knew it was coming. So I'm happy to be here and just want to share, you know, what I've learned through these experiences, but also, you know, I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I'm not a know-it-all. I don't know everything from A to Z. I only know what I know through experience, and I'm happy to share that much with you. So Andrea, if you would share the PowerPoint. And what I know is stories, and so I'll start with sharing some background and just building that rapport with all of you, even though this is virtual. So the girl on the left, if you've not noticed, is actually me. So I'm not sure, I'm going to say maybe I was 7 or 8 at that time, but this is the only picture that I have of myself in my childhood. And the reason why I'm sharing that picture is because this girl had experienced everything from alcoholic parents, single mother, domestic violence, drug use in the home, homelessness, food insecurity, bullying, and really face some inequities as I was, you know, growing up, because we weren't well-to-do, we weren't well off. So, you know, I take all of that experience and I try to embed it into my story, because that's my story. That's who I am. That's those experiences, good and bad, have molded me to be the person that I am today. And some of it may seem real traumatic, and I don't tell this story for anyone to feel sorry for me. I tell the story because I am that child, and I come from that family that a lot of you work with every day and the work that you do. And it's important for me to advocate on behalf of that girl and all the children and families that you serve. And to the right there, that's a current picture of my husband and our four amazing children. And within my experiences, I also was able to build a strong family, but also I was able to stop some life cycles that negatively impacted our family. So I think of myself as a changer because I changed the trajectory of my children's lives by changing the way that we raised them, the way that we spoke to them, the culture that we um, um, we shown them. I guess we grew up in that home culture, and so my children are really, really tight knit, and they're really close to us as well. So I've broken so many negative life cycles, and for me, that's something I'm very proud about. Coming from where I've come from, I've come a long way, and so I just wanted to share that with you because much of what I share is lived experience. You know, you can go to take classes, you can take trainings, you can read books, but what some of those things lack are lived experiences and actual stories. You don't get that from academia, you don't get that from trainings. So this part of that practical experience is important for everyone and anyone that works with families. So you can go on to the next slide, Andrea. And we'll look at this from the home visiting perspective. Part of this, really, as Tekla mentioned, I have a wide variety of experience. And I remember not knowing that early childhood was the field that I was going to go into. But among all of this, I was a teenage parent. I had my oldest daughter when I was 18. So I was a teenage mom. And so my hope for my daughter's future relied heavily on what I was able to provide her with. And so I went into early childhood and I started volunteering at the local Head Start program. After high school, I would go down there and do that. And that's where I really began to grow this love of working with children. Then I began to know how to talk with parents, older parents, younger parents, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles, everybody that was within that realm of that child's environment, home environment. And so it taught me to build rapport. It taught me to connect with them on whatever level. I would have simple conversations about the weather. I would engage them in something maybe their child had shared with me positively. But I also reminded them, and some of you probably have had this experience, that everything that happens at home and the child is able to witness it, they more than likely will tell me. So I would tease them and say, if you don't want me to know something, then don't do or say it in front of your child because they will tell me. Not me grilling them, but they'll just volunteer this information. You know, teacher, did you know, this happened last night and my dad said this to my mom and my grandma said this to my uncle. So sometimes I would bring that up, like just kind of a concern. Just know that, your child reaches out to me and tells me things because they need to tell somebody. And, but mostly really build it around family. I made the effort to learn the family members by name and the family. That way, for one, for security reasons, I would know who we're releasing to and if that was really their uncle or their aunt or cousin or brother. But also I was building the family within our program, really thinking about who I'm meeting with when I go to the home, who's usually there, who lives in the home, who frequently visits the child's home, who positively impacts and negatively impacts that home. So it's all these things that you're learning as you're building this rapport for your own self, like not really to share that out or for anybody else's knowledge, but really just for your own, first, your protection, and secondly, for your own knowledge of how to break down some of the barriers. But also community is a strong, I think a person working in a community needs to have a strong presence in that particular community. And this just tells and shows the family that you're invested in their community, that you care about what happens in that community, that you're not just here just to do these visits and check mark the box and go on with your day. And a lot of times that's with community events for, and then indigenous communities, it's always sports. It's always basketball, maybe outside sports, but I would make the effort to just go, even if it was just for 30 minutes. I would meet parents there. I would, let them see me in their community. I would shop at their local gas station, their grocery store. I would just be visible in the community. And I think that really helps the family know that you have good intentions and that you really want to be part of that community as well. So I know this leads into the safety part of it. Obviously, as a parent educator or home visitor, you're not going to be there after dark in a community that you don't know. I used to do the pair kind of approach. Myself and the other parent educator or the home visitor would go in pairs if we were doing anything like that. But the other part of the safety is when you're going into the home, you really have to be aware of your surroundings. Safety is a bigger issue than it was obviously when I was actually doing the work. Now you have such an increase in gun violence, domestic violence. There's been an increase in the use of drugs, meth, cocaine, alcoholism. So ultimately, you're thinking about your own safety, but as well as the family safety. So always something to think about. There was times I would drive to homes and would do a quick scan of everything that was around, and I would notice that the uncle that's usually intoxicated or would be there causing arguments, and I would know that that's not a good time to be there. So usually I would ask the family, is it a good time? Do we need to reschedule? Do you want to meet at the school? Do you want to meet at the chapter house? So some of those things have to be done for your safety, but also for the safety of the child and the family. So really thinking about things like that. I know some of the rural areas, I don't know if any of you, I'd actually like to see some hands about how many of you work in rural areas where cell phone service is really patchy. And I'm actually going to look at some of these hands. So I see some hands. Yeah, or no service at all. You're right. So thinking about your safety, there's no 911, there is no emergency services for you. You can't even call your colleague if anything should happen. It's when you work in some areas that don't have cell service, it's scary at the same time. But what I used to do is leave my calendar out and tell my colleague, well, I'm going to so-and-so's house. I'm scheduled for this time, but I should be back about this time. And so it would kind of just allude to everybody, like, just if I'm not back, please check on me. I might have a flat tire. I might, to run out, whatever would happen, but just letting people know where you're going. Yeah, you're right. 2 hours for law enforcement. Same thing for Navajo Nation. Or if anybody shows up, you're lucky if you get an officer there in 2 hours or less. Depending on what your emergency is, it might not be their emergency. So thinking about those things. And so, just being open, even though it's your schedule, share it with your coordinator, or yeah, that's right, letting them know you're going off the grid. I like that. I'm really glad. So I used to post a map because obviously your coworker, your coordinator doesn't know where all the families are, that they might not know. So I would post a map and I would actually pin locations like the House family, or the Morgan home, or wherever it is. So if push came to shove, they would know where you were at. So really good. I'm really glad you guys are doing that. It makes me feel good knowing you're being accountable, but it's something that I actually do with my own children, and they have learned to tell me where they're going and when they're going to come back. Mom, I'm home now, or Mom, I made it back to wherever. And so it just helps me have a little bit of less anxiety about, the safety of my children, but it's definitely something you can use in your work as well. We live in some tough times, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we just really want everybody to be safe. And you should never choose between your visit and safety. I'd always go safety first. And also looking at the balance part of it. And you've probably all been out in your community, or you've been to one of your towns nearby shopping on your own personal time, and you run into your families, you run into children, they'll yell at you across Walmart, teacher. And it's usually the ones that are real consistent with their visits, and your work really doesn't stop at the end of the day where you work. You're actually that person out in the community and the towns that you work with. The kids will spot you out, and come Monday, if you see them again on Monday, they'll ask you. They don't understand that you actually have life outside the work that you do. So they'll say, teacher, you have kids? You have a husband? So they really don't understand that you actually have a life outside the work that you do with them. It's, for me, it's funny because they don't believe, they probably don't believe that they should share you with anybody. But really finding that balance, because as a home visitor, parent educator, you often see more than maybe a teacher in a school would, because you're actually going in the home. So you're a witness to a lot of things. And I know you already know you're a mandated reporter. And there's a couple of times I've actually had to report abuse on all levels. And it's hard. It's hard to really think about, do I really want to do this? I know this family. They're good people, but ultimately it comes down to the safety of the child. Are they safe? And for tribal communities, it's the system is not working the way it should be. It actually works against Indian families, Indigenous families, because when a child's taken away, more than often they don't go to a relative or to somebody within that tribal community. They tend to go outside the the boundaries of the nation or the pueblo or the tribe. And so then you get into, some of those thinking of, what do I do? It's often good to seek out assistance from other people in that situation. But also where I'm going with that is sometimes you carry some heavy stuff. When you leave your work, you're thinking about so-and-so that didn't have enough to eat. You're thinking about the family that's going through some hard times. You're thinking about how you can help this family get into housing. You carry that, and what you do is you take that home into your own personal life, and it gets heavy because you're carrying all of that around, and that's where that balance has to come into play. Just really being realistic at what you can do, and if you've done all you can do for that day, when the day is done, then you have to grant yourself some grace at the end of the day and realize that you can't do it all. Nobody can do it all. And so I really just want to stress that about taking care of yourself, your own mentality, your physical being, your spiritual being, because children have innocent spirits. And so you automatically have that protector sense. So everything that's happening with them, you want to protect them, and you want better for them, you want more for them. And ultimately what it is you have to do your job, you have to follow all your guidelines. But there are times when I've showed up to a home and we didn't even get through the lesson. We didn't even begin the lesson. I'm more or less just sitting and listening to mom or to dad or to grandma, because they needed someone in that moment, and then you happen to be that person. And anybody else have that experience? I'm looking for hands. Yeah, right. Okay. It happens a lot because we all need that person, even if it's just some random stranger, sometimes at the gas station. But when you verbally express some frustration, some challenges, maybe it's annoyance, it really is giving that off your chest, and it feels good for them to do that. And sometimes like I always say, I'm not even a licensed counselor, but sometimes I feel like I just need to listen to them because I have nothing to offer them. But then listening is the biggest thing I think you can do. Sometimes you do have to put barriers up and let them know that you probably should not be telling me this, and I just want to refer you to this or to this or that. So home visiting, being a home visitor or even a parent educator, it's like you're wearing all these hats. You're a counselor, you're worrying about transition, you're worrying about assessing their development, their growth and development. You're a nutritionist, you're all of these things in one. And it's so amazing that you get through your day. So I am a huge, huge, huge fan and advocate for parent educating, because I've witnessed so many things in my home visits. But then to track these children 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, these are the children that you see in the schools, perfect attendance, they're succeeding in school, their parents are engaged in parent engagement, the parents are involved. So I really see those outcomes positively impacting the families. So I can speak nonstop about how much I love home visitors and parent educating, because you all do so much on a daily basis. And so really, really knowing that from personal experience, I'm a huge advocate. And then we go on to culture. I know when you hear culture, you think the basics: language, tradition, values. But one thing that I share with people is that, I'm a Diné woman, I am an Indigenous woman, but the culture in a whole is similar, for a lot of us. But also you have the culture in the home. It could be, I actually do live right beside my in-laws, and the culture in both homes is completely different. So there are cultures within cultures, and the only way you really realize that is by experiencing it and by talking with families, by talking with parents, by witnessing it. It just want to make that clear that there can be cultures within cultures, and just being respectful of those cultures. One example is in our home when our children were young. Somebody at the school where my children went to school had told them about not eating a certain type of meat and why it wasn't good for Diné people to eat that meat. But the male in our family, which is my husband, my son, are hunters, so we eat all of that meat. And so I felt it was just like a wrong thing for that presenter to be telling all of the kids that you should not be doing that. So then we had to go back and talk to our daughter about, it's okay for her to say that, but she shouldn't have generalized it to everybody because the cultures are different. We're more of a hunting culture. So just using that example. Have you all had that experience? Can somebody share one or two of such experiences? And just feel free to unmute yourself. Or you can type it in chat box too. Everybody's thinking about their best example, right?
I think one I have is homeschooling. We all have different opinions about homeschooling, and for someone to put their value or their belief on someone else over the other one was really hard for me to listen to someone telling someone that public schools are not good and just bad enough in the public schools, and not realizing that some people have no choice but to send their kids to public school. And sometimes it's a great thing and sometimes it's not. Well, that's with homeschooling too. I mean, it's in everything. So it's just that, kind of mentality where you try to put all your beliefs on somebody else. It makes it hard for them to explain it to other people.
Yeah, and it's really, and it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's amazing because we have to be impartial to all of these, everything, your politics, education, their views on what's happening within the school district, everything, what's happening with the schools, the local schools, even roads, and but that's just part of being people, humans. And I want to read some of this in the chat. Birthing practices, yeah. Bed sharing, safe sleep, yes. Yes. We slept with our girls until I think they were 3 or 4, but we're not complaining. We're not going out and telling people they should keep their kids and sleeping with them, but it worked for us. One, we started off real small in a 2-bedroom. So in the winter time, we had wood stove. And so our bedroom would be the warmest place of the house. So of course our children would sleep with us, right? And so, yeah. And somebody said religious beliefs and practices. Yes, it's always a very fine line between beliefs and practices, and then also being sure we don't impose our own biases and beliefs on the family. But sometimes they ask you, and it's okay if they ask you to share. I think part of that is just they want to know you're human. They want to know that you have thoughts, and they want to know you have beliefs. And I've personalized my visits with a lot of the families. But even today, what is it, like 30 years later, I still talk and really close with some of these families. And sometimes one or the other will actually step on my house just to say, so and so is doing real good. She's got a family of her own. So, just building that rapport, but also you're setting them up for success. It also involves a lot of advocacy. Like I said, you are reported men, mandated reporters, but also your advocates. When you're out in your regions, sometimes you have meetings, sometimes you have on the national level, maybe you have trainings. But like I mentioned before about even just the cell phone service, you'd be surprised at how many people don't understand that challenge. Or even internet service, they're able to download something at this, at the flick of your fingers. And for me, South of Gallup, when I'm back at my home, it's like my page is barely loading. So I'm telling people that I work with is don't make your flyers or your videos so heavy that it takes families so long to upload them. And we all know at some point, all of us have experienced how frustrating that can be. And sometimes I tease my son because our internet's so slow at home. He says, "Mom, it's so slow. I can't even do my homework." And I was telling him, "Well, did you put more coins in?" And he totally didn't get what I was saying. When you had to pay for internet, you put the coins in for it to keep going. But anyway, somebody mentioned something about their teens. One that came up with my teens once was someone having a strong opinion about toddlers should wear shoes all the time outside or certain clothing. And one of my girls said her family believes putting their feet on the earth is important. Those little parenting opinions come up a lot with our group. Yeah. And I actually, I'm a no shoes person, and I believe in children and people regrounding themselves with Mother Earth. So yeah, I would be interested to hear that debate. Feeding, sharing parents' food from same plate, eating with fingers versus utensils, introducing first foods. These are culture-based. And if you come from a family where their grandma, which I'm referring to my mom, makes tortillas 3 times a day, they don't eat with utensils, they eat with the food, the tortilla. And so I keep telling my mom, you're actually, what's going to happen when he doesn't have tortillas to eat? And he still eats that way. He's 17. So yeah. Husband raised on the reservation and mom not, but both Navajo, dad's belief in superstition. Everything, or acts if he does something will affect his family. He roped and stopped because of concerns of the umbilical cord. Mom tends to disagree and usually compromise. Hey, that's a good one. Really, really good one. And I'd like to hear more about that, Richard. Would you be willing to share? What was there an outcome?
Yeah, so interestingly, because I definitely going through a lot of like the cultural sensitivity, and I grew up with it with Alamo right next to us, and I got tons of friends. But yes, this father, he would, I guess he was really concerned if he roped, the umbilical cord was gonna wrap around their baby, their unborn baby. And mom and him would kind of get into arguments because she felt that, okay, well, you asked me not to do certain things, but then you'll turn around and do them. And because he ended up roping, he decided, well, I'm gonna rope, make some money. And then so he kind of went against his belief. But anyhow, no, everything turned out okay. But there has been some like concerns to where dad will go as far as to a medicine man, or they'll have like a religious prayer week. You know, and mom, there's some things that she will go with, but some things she's kind of like, I'm not too sure about this, you know, and she'll challenge him, and then he kind of has his conflict, but you know, it's interesting.
It is, and it sounds like one of those things where you just kind of stand back and you're watching them go back and forth as like, you know, like, why am I here? This is your conversation and something that should happen. And sometimes I would just find handouts for them to look at, and they do have webinars about positive Indian parenting, and I know it covers some of the things you guys are talking about, how to address those um, some of those issues. And so very interesting. I've heard all of this before, so I'm glad that you all are able to connect with what I'm sharing. You know, you're an advocate. So what I was saying is, like, you tend to be on the advocacy level when you're the number one thing, funding most of the time, but also when you're asking for supplies or your wants for families, you know, they need this. You don't realize, but you're advocating for the families that sometimes they don't have a voice, or sometimes they have minimal voice. So really going out and advocating for home visiting and the positive outcomes of being a home visitor, what you see, the growth that you see within the family. You know, just really thinking about getting your ducks in a row as you're going out and sharing the things you're doing. Every little thing counts. All the stories that you're sharing, it kind of seems, if you're not from that culture or not within deeply, you know, invested in that culture, it seems kind of silly. But to them, it's actually something very big, very important. So really giving them that voice and saying, yes, I hear you, you know, your your thoughts and your beliefs are valid. And so really just advocating for the family on all levels. That happens a whole lot, because even on the state level right now, I can tell you that the legislators don't consider, many of them don't consider home visiting, parent educating as learning, as early childhood. Very interesting to me, because we know it is, and we know how important it is. And we know that we're just not going in and sitting around with families, but it's intentional. Every visit we're going out on is intentional. You have a topic, you designed a plan, you have materials, you have things you're going to leave behind for them to do. So I think just advocating to whoever and whenever you can is important. That's part of the work that you're doing. We've talked a lot about barriers, biases, family situations, family makeup. Sometimes families separate. Sometimes they have to leave for safety reasons. Sometimes they get evicted. Sometimes there's financial trouble. All of those barriers, you have to work around that. And so it's almost like you're a magician, because you still have to make these visits happen, because of course we're held to so many visits per month, right, to meet your quota, so many hours of parent engagement, bringing them together. So, you know, just looking at all these barriers, but, you know, kudos to working through it. There's so many barriers, but also looking at the barriers, you also have to see the strength of the family, and you also have to use the strengths of the community in order to meet those barriers. Sometimes it's pairing people together. Sometimes so-and-so went through a similar situation, and then you put them with the other parent so she can help her to apply for Medicaid or apply for SNAP benefits. Sometimes they're more susceptible to talking with a colleague rather than going to the state office for assistance, or you know, seeking professional technical assistance. So using your parents to help each other often will help you to overcome some of those barriers without divulging too much information, of course. Medical care, vaccines, virtual natural remedies. Yes. Traditional first laugh and celebration. Yes, 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 yes. If you would go to the next slide. I didn't realize I could talk for an hour, everybody. It's 2:42. So outcomes of home visiting. Like I said, I'm really a strong believer of home visiting, parent educating. You know, there's tracking child development. We're preparing them for school. I personally don't like the term school readiness, but I like to focus more on the skills, like skill readiness. That way they'll be ready for school. But this was something that I thought, well, I am on the state level and we do focus on school readiness, so I probably should use the appropriate term and the state level term, but also maternal health. There's a lot of childbirthing deserts out there, that there's a lot of clinics closing down. So I just want to kind of bring that, like, you're really the person to connect them with maternal health. I've seen and heard of an increase of postpartum depression. I knew 4 people that had babies this past year, and 3 of them were diagnosed or have postpartum depression. And so really just connecting them with some of those resources. Sometimes it's community-based resources more than a health-based resources such as the local hospital. There are resources out there for positive parenting practices, but that's also something that's built into a lot of curriculums that you're already using. They have ways that and strategies that you can use and help parents understand at home, but you're also doing all of this in a culturally relevant approach. I used to adapt a lot of those handouts to make it appropriate for families. Child health, that's also something that's a positive outcome of home visiting. Parents are more prone to take their children for visits, well baby checkups, you know, be tracking the milestones. So those are one of the positive outcomes. Family economic self-sufficiency. And you're really just, like I said, assisting families to look at things like managing their money, making good food choices. Those are all integrated into the curriculum you're used. I used to use parents as teachers. I know they've done a lot of amendments, adjustments to the curriculum to be more culturally relevant. I'm familiar with Family Spirit. I've seen Firstborn's curriculum. So that's where I'm speaking from. Linkages and referrals, that's something you do all the time. It's probably a natural thing. You probably have a card or you have a flyer that they can go to if they need food from the food bank, or if they need help with clothing, things of that sort. Like I mentioned before, oh, it's already in there. Didn't notice that. Positive parent practicing. Reductions in child maltreatment. And so when you're teaching parents about how to parent their children, how to deal with their temper tantrums, how to soothe their babies, it really cuts down on you know, them acting out. And so then that eliminates the parent responding in a negative way to their child. So that's one of the outcomes of home visiting. And in the longer picture, in the long term, they see reductions in juvenile delinquency, family violence, and crime. So these are all the things that your everyday work contribute to. So I wanted to kind of bring this up because I wanted you to see that you're just not going in and working with families, but you're also addressing all of these issues, whether you know it or not, and I'm sure you know it, but it's important work, the work that you're doing. And for you to be out there in the communities, within the homes, working with families, you're very important to the system of early childhood. We could not do what we do without your work. And so that's kind of how I wanted to end that. I wanted to leave enough time for questions or even shares. Even if there's something you didn't understand or I'm not making sense, that's okay. You can tell me. Anybody have any questions? We have a good 12 minutes for questions.
I have a question if nobody else wants to jump in. It's a little bit different than what you were talking about, but as assistant secretary in this role that New Mexico has, my understanding is that it's the only position, the position you have is the only one in the country. And I'm just curious what you see as possible for children, given that this position exists for children in New Mexico.
You know, I feel very fortunate to be in this position. When I learn about the impact it has, especially on early childhood, the opportunities that are being provided to tribal communities that was not in place before, the funding that is available to tribal communities that they can use based on their tribal needs and priorities. I just feel very blessed to be in a position where I can and talk one-on-one with tribal leaders and education directors, childcare directors, Head Start directors, home visiting programs, and I hear their voices. And what I do is I bring that back to the department and I let them know, like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what's going on, these are the needs, this is what we need to do, this is not working. And being the only one in the nation, this position is the first of its kind anywhere. But we've already had 2 other states reach out because one of those states has created a similar position within their early childhood department, and another is ready to launch that position. And so I think that we're snowballing, and I think it's a great thing, and I think it's an amazing thing to be the model state, to be able to roll this position out, but also the work that we are doing within the department. And I'm not saying because I work for them, I'm saying because I see it. You know, the amount of work and passion that a lot of the leadership have, but as well as the staff, the experience that we're getting from within the department is amazing. Within each bureau, we have established tribal liaisons. And so we meet monthly, and we actually meet today. And what happens is I allow them to share out everybody. And they share their challenges, but they also share their successes. So a lot of fantastic data is being gathered, as well as stories, quantitative stories. I am a big fan of stories. Numbers are just numbers, but I think they have to be complemented with the quantitative data. And so, you know, I'm just excited about the direction the department is moving, and I know that I only have 3.5 years left, but I'm excited just to be able to have 3.5 years. I have so many ideas, and I have so many things that I'm already setting into play, and so I'm you know, I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to share all that with you. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Olga.
Hi. There you go. Oh, it's okay. Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much for sharing what you just said. Numbers are just numbers, and we need that story. And the reason why is because, like, for example, when you were talking about safety, yes, safety is extremely important. But then again, we also have to take into consideration the culture, the traditions, and the family's wishes. And it is hard, and I can see it a lot of times in home visitors when they're like, well, we educated about safe sleep, but the family truly wishes to co-sleep. I'm like, well, we have to teach about safety and what safety and co-sleeping and really see all the aspects. And I truly do thank you, because numbers are important. What really is happening with the families is amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing to see the parents grow. And it's amazing to see how the fathers, when they are involved, they are so supportive of their families. So thank you.
And thank you, Olga, for all the work that you do. And when you're sharing, I can hear the passion in your voice, and that helps me in my role to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I appreciate that.
So Catalina, a little earlier, you mentioned that you were a first-time mom at 18. I was a first-time mom at 19. So I certainly relate to the challenges of being such a young parent. Somehow my son survived my parenting. I'm curious if you were a home visitor going to see 18-year-old Cotillion Sneddy as that new mom. Now, in hindsight, what would you tell that younger you?
I do this all the time. Like I always, every year I look at that picture because that's the only picture I have. And I always think, what would you tell the younger you? And it's, in a Western perspective, having a baby at 18 may have seemed detrimental and might have seemed like a barrier. But on the other side, are my mom and my aunts and her mom had 11 children, right? She started having children when she was 14. That would be my grandmother. So perspective had a lot to do with it. And every year on my daughter's birthday, I tell her that she's the first best thing to ever happen in my life, because her life changed mine. And so I would tell the younger version of me that it's just the beginning of a great life. And it has been. I adore my children. I love them. And so I think most of it was because I invested in early childhood. And so, like you said, she was my guinea pig. Everything I learned in my classes, my experiences, I took it home to her. But if you meet her now, she is just the most amazing person. And I also have to share that she's a family support specialist for Southwest Human Development. So she actually technically is a home visitor herself. So yes. Anybody else? Well, I hope that what I've shared and my stories and, some of my guidance, I don't have the answer to everything, but, some of the questions you probably have, you already know the answer to. And you just need to have that confidence to use it. Because I'm sure most of you are parents already, and we already have that parental intuition. And I think that you wouldn't be doing the work that you do right now if you didn't have the passion and hope that I do. So I want you to know that from this position, but as far as me as a person, I truly, truly appreciate all the work that you do, and that we could not do what we do without parent educators and without home visitors, but also without the tireless and endless hours that you invest into our families and our children. So you are welcome to share the PowerPoint. You're welcome to share my information if you guys want to reach out. I'm open to everything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could be here today. And I'm so excited that you're part of the leadership in our state for early childhood. So thank you. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Have a good